All right, well, welcome. I'm here with Jesse Hallock. Been a pleasure to meet Jesse through the Chamber of Commerce here in Chicago. And Jesse is the business owner of Arabona Coaching and Training. Jesse, it's great to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for hosting.
Awesome. Well, let's just kick it off right now. So do you want to tell me a little bit more of who you are and kind of what you do with Arabona?
All right, starting with who I am. Wow. All right, well, I had kind of the non-traditional childhood, I might say. So I grew up in the Amazon jungle in Peru. Our vehicles were canoes and motorcycles. My dad built our house. We had generator, well, like that was kind of how we first started. So that was Peru, and then I lived in Bolivia in South America. I was there until I graduated from high school, and then I came to the States when I was 19. I've lived in Washington, Montana, Wisconsin, Indiana, and now I'm here.
Wow.
And so that's the personal side, kind of high-level overview. Married, have 2 daughters, lived in Chicago now about 12 years. Tell people I'm not a city person, but I like Chicago. So Chicago's my exception for cities.
I would say the exact same thing to me. I'm like, not a city person, but Chicago's different for some reason.
That's kind of the Jesse story.
Nice. So then, can we dig a little deeper on what you do at Arabona, kind of what you guys do, and tell us a little bit more.
It has been an evolving process, and I love that because I love change, I love new things. But when I first started Arabona, my wife and I started the business together, actually.
Okay.
And so when we started the business, I started as a coach. I got trained and certified as an executive coach, and I thought, I'm going to be a coach. And that, after not too long, turned into one of my clients saying, actually, I need you to run a workshop for our managers around something that you were coaching on. So it's like, well, I guess I do workshops now. So then I started doing workshops, and then a few years ago, I was asked by one of my clients, we really need an interim to be chief of staff. And so I stepped in as an interim chief of staff, and that started the fractional side of my business. So I do everything ties together around leadership. So executive coaching for leaders, individual leaders and executive teams. With workshops, it's all around leadership and management. That stuff is my jam.
Okay.
And then around the fractional work, it's basically I'm coming in a reduced capacity within a small to medium-sized organization, helping certain aspects of their leadership, and primarily at this point, mostly on their operations leadership as a fractional COO.
That's a lot of stuff.
It is, but it's my jam. I love it that every day I'm doing new things. I'm talking to different people. I'm using different skills on different days depending on what services I'm providing for a client. But it's all tied together with I just love helping people.
Yep.
I absolutely love helping people, and leadership is kind of my realm that I do that in.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love what I do.
That's awesome to hear. So, how long have you been doing this? Did you start it in Chicago? Have you done it all over the
Chicago,
country?
I serve clients in other places, but I did start in Chicago right here. And I started as a coach. I got certified as a coach in 2018. And I figured, I would keep my other job at 2018 just to kind of start coaching random people to see where I fit in the world.
Yep.
And then in 2019, January 1st, officially launched the business, incorporated. And that was here in Chicago. And that was me as a coach, and then we've continued to evolve since then. But it's been Chicago through and through, even though I have clients in other places that I've served, and I do travel for some of my workshops.
Nice. Yeah, that's so exciting.
It is,
Nice.
and I constantly am doing things that I've never done before.
Yeah.
Because there's same principles. There are a lot of the same principles in leadership and management. There are no radically new laws or principles in leadership, but it's how do we apply this in a totally new environment with different people? And so that part, I think, is very refreshing for me to be able to continue doing.
Yeah. So can we go a little deeper on the fractional side of the COO? So when you're going into this business or someone calls you up, what does that look like? Walk me through the process. Do they just call you up and you walk in the door, or
it all starts with relationships, first of all, because so far the people who have contacted me either have known me because I've worked with them in a different way, or they know somebody who knows me.
Okay.
So it's hey, I heard about you. This is kind of what we're looking to do. And on the COO side of things, for me, that's processes and finances are kind of the big pieces of that.
Okay.
There are some like overarching like people strategy side of things, but it's usually we have this particular pain point or we have this particular vision for the future. And the types of businesses and organizations that I usually work with are like small to medium size. The fractional means like you're getting a fraction of my time. So it's organizations that are not big enough to have a full-time COO type of thing. And so I come in at a fraction of the time, but I'm still bringing in the high-level perspectives to help them reach whatever those goals are. And so usually it starts by coming in. I like talking to people to learn and ask questions. I think you get a lot better insight when you ask questions than just coming in with answers. And so I start by show me the books, and then let me talk to kind of the main people who I'm going to be involved with right on the front end just to learn. And then that turns into, okay, well, like, where are you trying to be in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year? And my entire job, like I said at the beginning, is how to help people. So then the rest of my contract is, this is where you're at now that I've got current reality, and now I have clarity on where you're trying to go. And maybe we've workshopped that together a little bit to have better clarity on what those goals are. But then the rest of it is just, I'm going to help you get there. Through the finances, through processes, through people strategy. There's, even though it's not a coaching contract, there is coaching involved with whoever the leaders are. All right, if this is the change that you wanted to make, all change is people change, whether there's other kind of changes involved, but people have to be willing to change. And so that's when coaching comes in handy.
Yeah, it sounds very goal-based. And as you kind of unwrap a little bit of that, so you are the operations person, but a lot of that comes with finance, accounting, marketing. Do you want to talk about maybe how you learned a little bit more of that, or what you have learned?
And I will start by saying, like, I don't come in to be the implementer. Usually, not usually, there are people who do the actual implementation of each of those specific tasks. I'm not going to come in and do all of those different things, but usually all of those functions exist one way or another, where you have either different people responsible, this person responsible for marketing, and this person responsible for finance and HR. But ultimately, what I come in and say, okay, how do we get all of these pieces to work together in a different way to accomplish a goal? And so I don't come in and say, now I'm going to take these jobs that are already being done. But yeah, my interim chief of staff role, I had somebody report up to me who was in charge of HR. I had somebody report up to me who was in charge of finance. I had somebody report up to me who was in charge of programs. Somebody report up to me who was in charge of like facilities and IT. And so my job then is not to become a better expert than them at that area, because I'm never going to be more of an expert at all of those different things than all of those people. So my job becomes, okay, from a leadership standpoint, how do I bring these different things together? Because what operations and facilities want might not be the same thing that what programs want. And what HR wants might not be the same thing that what finance wants. And so, like, how do we bring these together in a new way to accomplish that goal? So it's to bring kind of the 30,000-foot view, when usually I haven't met anyone's like, I've got lots of leftover time at work to just think about what I want to do, right? And so you have busy people. You have busy people getting a lot done. And so it's like, okay, y'all are in implementation mode. I'm going to pull us out of there for a little bit to talk about big picture, where are we trying to go? And so that's kind of my job, not to become the expert in the areas that other people are experts in.
And so you did touch on the leadership part, which is what I want to go into next. So what are some of the challenges that you see with these businesses that you help on the leadership side? How do you come in and help them with leadership?
Yes, and so kind of my helping with leadership looks different depending on coaching or workshops or fractional, because in the workshop side of things, I'm working with leaders in various organizations, from really, really big ones and like government agencies all the way down to like mom and pop shop types of places. And so there's a really wide range there. But when you're looking at big companies, typically it's the challenge of, how do we navigate the various levels of an organization? Because what made you really good as an individual contributor is not the exact same skill set that makes you good as a manager of individual contributors. And what makes you really good, once you learn some things and you're a good manager of individual contributors, and then you get moved up and now you're a leader of people who also lead people, then it's like, well, this is kind of different. And you move all the way up, and at every level, there's a new set of challenges. And so kind of at the top, it's with an executive team, how do you get some really high-functioning, smart, powerful, energetic people to work together towards that common goal? because at that point, it's not usually a matter of like, oh, this person doesn't know how to do something. No, it's like, how do we get all of these different things that everyone is trying to get done and bring alignment to them? Because it's in this case, it's about how do we get a process that works well for everyone, because it's not usually, the issues at that level are usually process issues. They're not, oh, we don't know how to do something issues.
Okay.
And so in a small, medium-sized business, nonprofit, especially in family-owned businesses, there's kind of that mindset of, well, we were smaller before and now we're bigger, but in a lot of ways we're still operating as if we were a small business or a small organization. So there's some of the growing pains of like, okay, if we're going to scale, here are some things that we need to let go of.
Yep.
Here are some things that we need to do differently, and here are some new things that we need to do that we never had to do before.
Yeah.
And it's just bringing an outside perspective. And usually it's not like, wow, that does not make sense at all. Usually it's like, yeah, that makes sense. But it's just the hard part of actually like, how do we take those steps to get where we want to be? And so sometimes an outside perspective where it's like, I'm not here for you, I'm not here for you, I'm not here for you, I'm not here for you. I'm here for like together where we're going to be.
Yep.
And sometimes an outside perspective can be really helpful to bring those together.
What are some trends that you see with business owners that you're working with?
Yeah, and so I primarily work with smaller business owners. Sometimes it's directly the founder who is running the business. And like the biggest thing is kind of what I call founder syndrome. I guess it's not a term that I invented, but like founder syndrome, where I started this from the beginning. Sometimes it's like in my basement, in my living room, whatever it is. And then as it grows and you get other people involved, it's really hard to let things go. It's really hard to delegate. It's really hard to trust somebody with the thing that you built. And so from a fractional COO standpoint, it's, okay, if there is this lack of trust, or if there's this hard of a time letting go, it's a process issue, because it's either your process isn't clear enough, so they don't know how to do it right, or you've now made it clear enough and they're not doing it right, then you have a foundation for accountability. But usually, the way past that is, okay, I totally get this. Nobody could have done what you did in that way. But we got to build a process, because you now are the thing holding your business back. The very thing that got your business going is now the very thing that's holding your business back. And so that's, from an internal standpoint, that's kind of the founder syndrome that you got to work through to be able to keep growing, so that the very thing that built the business isn't the thing that holds the business back. But then that also naturally has kind of its implications in transitioning from the business, selling, whether that's merging, whatever that is, to be like, okay, I built this, how do I let this go? How do I transition out? In some cases, it's, I've been doing this for so long, I want to retire, but I don't know my life outside of this. Or like, I don't even know how to transition out of this. I don't know how to retire. I don't want to do this forever, but like, I built this, so what do I do? And so it's that process of coming up with a number of like healthy transition plans. And then of course the piece after that is, okay, once you've jumped out of the airplane, once you've made the decision and it's happening, like, how do you manage all of the change that happens inside of you when a big part of who you are isn't there? Whether you're retiring or not, that's a big part of you that you've got to be able to transition through. And that's change management on a very personal scale.
Yeah.
So that doesn't make it easier, but when we can name it and we can identify processes, my favorite word, identify processes, you have a way to move through things so that you know, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do next. And it's the next correct thing that you can do is the way forward.
Nice.
Not trying to look at every single step down the road.
Yep.
So that's my perspective on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that ties into my next area I want to go into, is on our side of the business as financial advisors, working with people on their finances. And a lot of the advisors, at least in our office, but even around the country, is you got a lot of these advisors that do it all on their own. And there's challenges there, and I've seen them, like you've probably seen, where you're the CEO, you're the COO, CFO. How can you maybe paint the picture of what's a good process to implement to start somewhere? What's something small that an advisor can bring to their practice?
Well, you use the magic word there, process. Like especially if you have anyone who has a lot of responsibility in different parts of their own practice, whether they're a part of a larger organization or not, like there's a high level of, I need to figure out how I'm going to do this. And so most of the time when it's just one person or a couple of people, we're going to try a bunch of things and see what works, and we're going to do what sticks and what doesn't stick, but there isn't necessarily a repeatable process. And so the starting point with anything is, what are you doing right now? Write it down. Just for right now, like write it down. How you go about prospecting, how you go about doing conversations, how do you do your introductory conversation, how do you move forward in that process? And maybe some of these things are handed down of like, hey, here are best practices.
Right.
But for yourself, writing down what have I found to work, because then you can try to come at it again from a more objective perspective. If I were just looking at this piece of paper and this was somebody else's practice, what advice would I give them?
Yeah.
And usually, all of us can look at what we do and be like, yeah, I kind of know that this is probably not the best possible way to do this. And it's one approach to taking a look at process. But there's a quote that I really like that's, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. And like that was clearly said by somebody who loves processes, right?
Yeah.
Like somebody like me is like in love with processes. But I think there's still an element to that that's good for reflecting on.
Right.
If I can't describe the success that I'm getting as a process issue or as a process that I've built, then is it really repeatable? And is it really success that I can count on? Or if I can describe the ways in which I'm not getting the success in which I want as process issues and process failures, then you can't really identify what the issue is. Another quote. I promise I'll shut up after
No,
this.
keep going.
Another quote that I really like is,
it.
a problem well defined is a problem half solved.
That's right.
And so anytime you're looking at your own practice, usually the hardest work is to ask enough of the questions to realize what is the root of the issue that I'm experiencing, because usually we stop asking questions too soon.
Okay.
One of the root cause analysis practices is ask the 5 whys. I'm not getting as many clients as I would like. Well, why? And then you answer that question. Well, why is that? You ask that question. Usually it takes no more than 5 times to be like, oh, this is at the absolute core, this is the issue that I'm facing. And then you work from there. And you're not trying to address surface issues when it's actually a core issue. And that whether that's a solo practice or a major enterprise, it's the same thing that applies.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to get down to the root of the issue and solve that, not whatever the presenting problem is.
Now, you mentioned repeatable process. Now, when you're working with a company, and you don't have to mention names or anyone, but do you want to give us an example of, say, a good repeatable process that you've worked on, or maybe one that hasn't worked to where you wanted it to?
Well, I think the biggest, and I'll keep it a little bit more general with this one, but a repeatable process is really helpful if you're trying to grow. So let's say you start your own business, pick a random thing that is not what you do.
Construction.
All right, let's say that you start as a handyman. Solo operation, I'm going to go out and find my own work, and then you become very successful in that. So then you're like, well, the next step is I should hire people and let me expand the business. But just because you're successful doesn't mean that you can help somebody else be successful if they work for you. And so a repeatable process is, all right, if I had to tell 100 people how to do what I do in the same way that I did it so that they get the same results, how specific would I need to be? And that's a repeatable process, because if you do it by yourself, you don't really have to do it as a process. If you're just trying to tell one other person, you can be intimately involved in how they do it. But when you think about, if I had to tell 100 people how to do this in such a way that they got the same results that I got, that helps you think about, oh yeah, I need to probably write things down better, and I need to be more specific, and I need to have clearer structure, because ultimately that's what you're getting at with growth, is how do we get more people to achieve the same results?
Yep.
And with that process, you get more people, but then you get a wide range of results.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a mental exercise of if I had to tell 100 people and give them instructions where I was not involved, how to get the results that I got, what would I tell them? And so that principle you can apply in any number of businesses, including what you do. If you want as you build a practice and you bring other people along, can you describe to them how to get the results that you've gotten without your involvement?
Yeah. Yeah, I already see that just in what I do, and other advisors and other businesses, that if I can't describe it, it's not going to be repeatable.
love me some quotes. Like a great quote by George Bernard Shaw in communication is the greatest illusion in communication is the greatest mistake in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So communication is measured by how well somebody understands, not how well we thought we did. And that's also, regardless of what role we're in, that's an issue where we think, well, I told them. It's like, well, what you told and what somebody understood are rarely the exact same thing. And so that is an iterative process where you find out where the things that I thought I was clear about, that somebody is not receiving that clarity. And it's a process that helps you build that, that repeatable process.
And I think you touched on it right there. A lot of what we see in our business, and it's probably the same with you, is the listening aspect. And what I found is I'm like, oh, I'm a good listener. No, I'm not a good listener. I'm like, what someone tells you isn't always what they're telling you.
And
have you found the same, or
and
any
that's
examples?
why, and that's one of the things that I love about coaching, because in a context like this, interview style, I'm talking a lot. In coaching, I'm usually rarely sharing my opinions or my thoughts on something. It's my job to ask questions. And structurally, as a good coach, it's about how do I ask questions so that you are thinking, not how do I give you all of my thoughts. And so built into best practices of coaching is I should not be really sharing a lot of my thoughts on something. And so it is when you ask more and more questions that you start to unlock maybe the first answer that you got now looks a little bit different than the last answer you got. And sure, sometimes that might be intentional. Somebody's just like, I'm not sure if I trust you. I'm not sure if I'm ready to go that deep. But other times it's just, oh, I wasn't even clear in my own mind. But now that we've talked through a bunch of questions, I'm even more clear on what I was thinking than when we first started the conversation. And I think back to, like, if you go to a doctor's office and they ask you what's going on, you're going to tell them the presenting problem. This is what I feel. Usually that's not the same thing as the root problem, back to the root cause. And that's the same thing when you're talking with people. The first thing that somebody tells you, it may not be intentionally wrong. It may not be intentionally unhelpful, but it's kind of that thing is your job is not to take that first thing they said. Your thing is to take that first thing they said and use it as a starting point to get to, like, what is actually at the root. So it's the same with people in that sense. And usually in my conversations, that is not an intentional, I'm not going to tell you the thing. It's usually just a process where someone grows in awareness and clarity so that by the time we're done, they have a different way to talk about the same issue.
And that's where those 5 whys come in.
Yep, absolutely.
You're right to the root.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I love what you guys do, because it's the same thing. What is your goal? And how do I get you there? But you guys do that with finances and planning in that kind of way. And I do that, like, on the business side with leaders and structures and processes. But ultimately, you're trying to do the same thing. What do you want? No, like, what do you really want?
And because sometimes it's not easy.
As you talk about it more, you might get answers either that change because you realize, actually, what I thought I wanted isn't exactly what I want. Or you just have better nuance. I wanted this, but now that we talk about it, I can narrow that down to here are actually the 5 most important things to me. And so that's how you arrive. You can better be helpful when you have a better idea of what is actually going on.
For sure. So I want to switch gears here a little bit. Now, you hear more and more now that networking is a big thing, and you're a guru at networking. So tell me a little bit about how networking has impacted your business, but also how networking has helped you as a person.
Yes. Well, networking is how we met. So, here right now, this is an example of what networking can do. But how it's impacted my business, like, I wouldn't have a business if I didn't network. When I first started my business, I think I was 26, and I knew that advertising and marketing was not going to be how I started my business. I did not have the illusion that a CEO was going to look at my ad and say, yes, I want the 26-year-old that nobody has ever heard of before. Pick that person. And, like, I just knew I'm good at what I do, but it has to come through relationship, and it has to come through building trust. I don't have brand recognition. I am essentially a nobody when I started my business in that sphere. And so I started my business, and the very first thing I did after that was join the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. Because I was like, I need a place to meet people. I'm a dude that grew up in the jungle of South America. Chicago is totally, absolutely new. And so I needed a place to meet people. And for me, that was my choice. And in networking, there are a lot of different perspectives you can take. But for me, it was, I'm going to pick one place that has kind of the type of people that I want to be involved with, and I'm going to dive really deep.
Yep.
I'm not going to join 10 different organizations and go to 10 different things. I'm like, I tried a few different things to figure out where I fit, but then it's like, okay, chamber for me, the Chicagoland Chamber is where I'm really going to dive deep. And so I did. Came to as many events as I can, started volunteering, became part of the Emerging Leader Council, help lead the council now. And so by becoming more and more invested and more involved, that has widened my pool of people that I've connected with. And like many of us are familiar with the saying, like people do business with people they know, like, and trust. But that requires, for people to know you, requires some presence. Like you've got to be there. For them to like you, it requires connection. So you probably need to be there a few times. And then for trust you, that's consistency.
Yeah.
You show up in the way that you first built connection. You keep showing up that way, and over time that builds trust.
For sure.
And so for me, I would not have started my business, or it would not have made it past the idea phase if it weren't through networking. And to this day, I do zero advertising.
Yep.
That's not how I get business. I think every single client that I've ever had and have to this day have come either directly through my network. I met somebody, we got talking, and now we do business together.
Yep.
Or a client came to me, or I came to them because of a referral from somebody else who knows me, likes me, and trusts me, and is willing to put their name out there for me.
Yeah.
And so, to this day, that is still how I run my business. That's still how I grow my business. And I have very little control over that. Like, I never know when a referral is going to come in.
Yep.
So it's not one of those, I don't have you're going to love this, I don't have an amazing process where I know I can do this many calls, and this percentage of those calls are going to turn into meetings, and this percentage of those meetings are going to turn into business. Like, I don't have that, but I do know that I get clients through relationships, and so I just build a lot of relationships.
Nice.
So that's my approach.
Nice. And I think you laid out that networking of know you, like you, trust you. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the foundation. And especially with something like finances or leadership, you don't want a random person touching your finances, right? Like, you really got to trust that person.
For sure.
And you really have to feel a connection, because there are plenty of other people that they could be working with.
Yeah.
So why is it you?
Yeah.
And like, why is it me? It's not that there's a shortage of coaches in the world.
Yeah.
Like that. That's not the case. So why would they work with me instead of somebody else? And it's only going to be because of that connection and that consistency and that trust that's built up over time. And that's been my approach.
Nice. Yeah, I really like just the way that you've done that. Word of mouth is the best way to do business for most people. And it also sounds like you might have some processes to work on the calls and meeting side. So that's where maybe your wife comes in as your coach.
Oh no, my wife is the one who keeps me from doing really stupid ideas. I'm like, babe, we should try this. She's like, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you're right. I know. So she does help with a lot of the behind the scenes things. I'm the one in front with clients. But no, she is absolutely my thinking partner, keeps me from doing things that I will regret, and also sometimes keeping me motivated to keep going on a new idea that I'm ready to give up on. She's like, no, like, you got to give this a fair chance. And so I don't know if anybody can truly do it all the way alone. And so I'm grateful that my wife and I can have those conversations and can balance each other out.
Yep.
In addition to the other advisors in my life that speak into me.
Nice. Now I'm just curious, would you guys ever expand as things get rolling? I mean, you're pretty new and generally new and young in your business.
I have zero desire to.
Really?
Yep, I have zero desire to. And you know, that might change down the road, but I love helping other people scale. But at this point, like, the flexibility that I have with my family and being the kind of the sole provider in our business, and not having to worry about employing other people and filling other people's schedules.
Right.
And I've been in leadership roles. I also know all the challenges that come with leadership. And like, at this point, I'm not looking to build an empire, not looking to scale my own business. I'm just looking to serve clients really, really well.
Yep.
And be able to maintain the flexibility that my family enjoys, of being able to manage our own schedule and say yes to the things that we want to say yes to, and know the things that we want to say no to, so that we can kind of have the life that we're looking for personally in addition to professionally. And that's been absolutely the biggest benefit of running our own business versus me trying to become a coach for a different company.
Yeah. And I think you really get that work-life balance with that, and just you're grounded in your values.
Yeah.
You know what you want.
Yeah, and in this case, work-life balance, when you start your own business, it doesn't mean that you work less. But it means for me, I've been able to choose how my work gets distributed. And so there are absolutely crazy days and absolutely crazy seasons, but then we can plan for different seasons. So like we're going to be traveling soon, and yes, I'll be seeing some of my clients still, but I've chosen to say no to some things so that when we're traveling, I can just enjoy being with my family and take calls here and there. But like that's something that I could never do if I worked for somebody else. But I've had to earn that, right? Like at the beginning, you got to say yes to a lot of things. Things that you don't love. Sometimes it does throw things out of whack a little bit. But now 6 years into it, I'm like, yeah, I can say no to that. Yeah, I can say no to that in order to be able to do something else that's a priority.
Yeah. Now, just kind of wrapping things up, who is Jesse outside of what you do day to day?
Well, the first thing is not suits. Like, again, I grew up in the jungle. I grew up with no shirt and no shoes, like all day long. So very different than the Chicago business attire Jesse. I love outdoor stuff, naturally kind of from my upbringing, love rock climbing. And so most of the time I do that indoors here in Chicago because lots of climbing gyms and not a whole lot of places to climb outside. So camping in the summer with my girls, my wife and my 2 daughters. Climbing with my wife and my daughters. Yeah, that's like outdoors. Love outdoors. And I act very, very social because it's a big part of my job. But I love being a great introvert that shuts myself in and doesn't see people. And so it's like, you got to, in anything we do in life, we've got to be able to flex and do different things.
That's true.
But yeah, outside of work, I'm like, all right, we're going to tone this back and just not see people. And
so are you a movie person, or you read, or?
Audiobooks, books. I do enjoy watching things with my wife, but it's just a lot of like, at this point, it's my favorite thing to do, just go home and play with my daughters. They're just so much fun. And try to go climbing a couple times a week, and my 3.5-year-old rock climbs with me. And so it makes for great daddy-daughter dates. We can go out rock climbing together. So, no, that's me. Try to be laid back, kind of a little bit toned back on the social side, try to be outdoors as much as possible.
I'm going to put you on the spot. I need a good book recommendation for our viewers.
Ooh, all right. So many I could give you, but specifically, if you're in that like going up the career progression that I mentioned earlier of individual contributor to manager of contributors, that kind of pipeline, an amazing book that you can take with you for your entire career is called The Leadership Pipeline. And what it does is it breaks down every one of those steps and tells you, here's what you got to know. Here's what you got to learn. Here's how your time changes. Here's how your values change. And all the way from individual contributor to leader of enterprise. And so you can keep that as a handbook with you every step of the organization.
I love it.
It's a fantastic book for that and incredibly practical.
And I'll throw that in our description for people to get the link to. Now, last question. What would you give Jesse advice on before starting your business?
This is going to sound awful. Don't do it. And just because if I had known everything that was involved, I might not have done it. Now that I'm a few years and I'm like, wow, I'm really glad I did that. But no, I mean, I think for me, it's just that it'll all work itself out. And part of the thing with my business is I am committed to helping people. I'm not committed to any particular version of what my business looks like. And I think if multiple years down the road, business Jesse, we're talking to just about to start the business version of Jesse, it's like, look, you're going to have an entire drawer of what I call my idea graveyard. This is what things could look like. This is what we could do. And that's good. That's fine. But don't be attached to the version of the business, whatever version it is right now. And so I think that aside from the don't do it, it's really hard, would be the don't be attached to any particular version of the business that you're living in right now.
I love it. Well, Jesse, it was great having you. And for the viewers, Jesse Hallock with Arabona Coaching and Training. Feel free to reach out and give him a call.
Thank you very much, Lance. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure.